Thanks. Perhaps we can move on for Heli and Katarina and talk about this fiber sources, because Outi already touched the textile waste streams, and it's really interesting that there are so many interesting stuff emerging. For example, using the textile waste streams, and as Tracy was already explaining, so actually all the materials are not as valuable. It's not so easy to recycle. But Heli and Katarina, you and also Herbert, you can join for this discussion. That what will be the future's fiber sources? What kind of side stream we should also add into the discussion that it's more sustainable? Can Heli, for example, you can start.
Yeah, well, as I was talking about or presenting the let's say the Fortum's approach to the utilization of these agricultural residues. So certainly that represents a untapped resource. However, by no means so it is it a I mean a question-free raw material. So of course there are related questions about the land use or actually the for example the soil fertility, the nutrient balance issues that are still quite let's say not known to a large extent, and very very different in different locations. So that of course needs to be kind of studied in order to be able to control the whole value chain and ensure the sustainability, and of course in larger picture the biodiversity. But overall, so the idea of utilizing agricultural raw materials is arising from let's say kind of reaching multiple targets at the same time. So not being in the position to compete with existing pulping industry, for example, and then being able to create new economical opportunities for people in, for example, in these rural areas, and at the same time to fight these adverse climate impacts. So I think this is an area that can be extended to a large scope.
Thank you. So Katarina, do you want to continue? So of course we have also the one discussion you nicely already presented, that well, the forests are growing all the time in Finland, so we have this material, but of course there has been also this critical discussions going on that should we cut forest because of the textile industry. So Katarina, what's your opinion for this future sources for fibers?
Yes, well, of course, a lot of wood forest is cut already for the textile industry, as that's where the cellulose mainly comes from. And there's a lot of work being done to ensure the sustainability of the current sources, the canopy audits, and all this traceability work ongoing to make sure that hopefully even the consumer understands where the wood comes from. But we hope, of course, that we can show what we strongly believe is that the Finnish forest management and Finnish forest is really of the highest and most sustainable grade and type of wood available there, and we do like to see it going to high value use and to that kind of value chains where recycling is possible. So those are important aspects for us. And of course, when we try to make our textile fibers, we have the ability there, or what we are trying to achieve is to use these paper grade pulp as the intermediate there. And that actually means that we can get a higher yield of the fibers, the mass yield out of the wood. So there's more wood going into the textile fibers. And also we would be able to produce it completely fossil free, since we have completely fossil free mills running in Finland. So those are maybe the two ways for us to try to make MMCF as sustainable as possible. Hopefully we see that happening in the future, and of course there are many other ways of making that effort as well.
Thank you, Katarina. So Herbert, you have been already testing a lot of different kind of materials in this ion cell process. So what's your view for the future? Now when you are building up, you are scaling up the ion cell production line. So what kind of materials you would like to see in the process?
Yeah, before I answer this, I want to make a more global perspective. Currently, something like 26 to 28 million tons from 112 million tons of textiles are produced from cotton. Cotton, interestingly, is the most wanted raw material by the customers. So everybody who goes into a textile shop wants to have some textile fibers from cotton. However, since 20 years, cotton is basically stagnating, and the increase in cellulose-based textile has been mostly compensated by an increase in viscose fiber production. So we have currently 7 million tons of viscose fibers, so that adds to something like 35 million tons. And then we have 5 million tons of textile fibers from natural fibers. So typically jute is the major one. So there I see a future potential, especially hemp. Hemp is much more environmentally friendly than cotton. So of course it will still remain a niche raw material, that's clear. And I'm fully, let's say, supporting what my colleagues have said. I think in Finland especially, but also in Austria, where I come from, we have this FSC certified forests. And I think there is no problem in utilizing the wood from those forests, even though I know there is a lot of pressure also to Lansing and others from different NGOs and others. But as long as it is a carbon neutral production, I'm pretty sure that this will be the future. In research, there are a lot of activities also to test synthetic biopolymers, like 1,3-glucane, both in beta and alpha version. There have been already been some successful trials by DuPont, but also other companies. So that will continue, and I'm pretty sure that in not maybe 2035, but maybe later, this could be a source. And then, of course, what I also mentioned in my lecture is that we have to recycle the textile wastes, both mechanically, but in future more and more chemically, because that will basically prolong the longevity of the textile fibers. So these three aspects: recycled textile waste, new biopolymers, and FSC certified forests, and maybe also the one or the other niche annual plant. I'm not very convinced that, for example, raw material like straw will play a major role. That discussion has been already 30 years ago on pulp production, especially in the middle west in the US, where much larger wheat production is carried on, but it never materialized. It's too expensive, and the materials not comparable to good cellulose-based materials. So this is my vision for the future.
Thank you, Herbert. So now when we have so many different kind of like technologies to produce these fibers, so do you believe that in the future we will have more variations, that there will be like a local fibers, small factories and local fibers, or will there be big ones and similar kind of fibers that everyone is producing? What's your view for that?
Yeah, as a teacher, I'm reviewing the history, and I think we can learn what has happened over the time with the textile fibers. So going back to the 19th century, the first man-made cellulose fibers, there was cellulose nitrate. And this was hyped a lot, but it could not survive even 20 years. And interestingly, viscose survived. And the reason why it survived was not the technology, because the technology is highly polluting, but the final products, they were so attractive. They could basically exceed even cotton properties, and they are usable even in technical sectors, for example, tire cord, which have the highest demands on tenacity and other properties. So that was the only reason, otherwise it would have been already disappeared. So the one with the highest properties at a reasonable or low cost will make the race.
Thank you. That was interesting point. So perhaps we conclude the panel by talking about the textile waste, because everyone knows that it's a huge problem, but on the other hand, a huge opportunity. And as Trace was already pointing out, it's not so easy to recycle. There are these problems that what to recycle, and Outi and Hannes, you were already pointing out that, well, there's specific textile waste that are valuable, more valuable than others. But still, of course, when we are moving as a society towards the circularity, that means that we have to take back everything. So there will be a lot of this kind of textile waste that is not so easy to recycle or might not be at all. So how to make this economically viable? What to do? And I think that was it Outi who already mentioned that there have to be side streams, so that how actually we can get this more like economically viable. Who wants to start with this? Outi?
Short note, yes. Well, actually, we all realize that there has to be a change, and I think that we have a possibility for value-added product innovations to the large extent. And I think that this means possibilities for operators throughout the whole value chain financially to be producing something out of the recycled materials, but on the other hand, also for the end users or the end brands who use the recycled materials, that will be definitely grown brand value. And this is something to point out. And how to make it more viable, I think that there is one key issue is that, of course, the regulation will do some part of that, but there has to be a way that municipals also will be showing the way. That there has to be, for example, when it comes to tenders, there should be points for recycled materials. And I suppose that this will be part of the regulatory change as well, that there will be a demand. So this will, of course, help a little, but I think that this is it has to be valued. This is the main thing.
Yes, and I think that already, Hannes, you touched that in your presentation, that, well, you can also provide a service, or you can be a link, for example. So that's important point. Do you want to share some of your thoughts how that will happen in the future? And please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yes, I see the future also, like with regulations, and let's say, for example, like if the regulations would help companies to use recycled or fresh monomaterials, not blends, materials that would be easy to recycle. As Outi pointed out, it's not easy to recycle like old clothes because they are like blends. And by regulations that they would also have the take-back systems, for example, as we do have in Finland for electronics. When we buy electronics, you pay for it and you can take back it to the store and they recycle it. So for example, companies would kind of own the product after they sell it to the consumer, but the consumer can always take the product back to the store, and the producer knows how they will recycle it. And if we get this kind of a, let's say it could be tax compensated, whatever, but I mean, like if we get a process that we produce easy recyclable products, and then we take them back by ourselves and give them to somebody who recycles them and makes new fibers and new, let's say, textiles out of it. I mean, you know, that would be a conclusion for the future, for example.
Thanks. Okay, and then Tracy, I would actually like to discuss with you to close up, and actually one point, and that came from Herbert's presentation, that quite interesting research results that this ion cell recycling technology, you can even produce better quality durable fibers than the original one has been. And of course, this is actually quite interesting from the future's point of view. So will there be a lack of textile waste in the future? If this is the future that we are going to, that everyone wants to use textile waste, and it's easy and possible to recycle, and it's even possible to make better quality yarn than the original one has been. So actually that means that we might be fighting about textile waste in the future. What's your opinion for this?
I hope we reach the point where we can fight because there's not enough. I hope that happens. But I think the last figures for global textile fiber consumption, it was over 100 million. I think it was 105 or 110 million tons, if I remember that correctly. It's a lot of fiber specifically for the textile industry, not just fashion, but generally fiber for the textile industry. And it's only going up over time. So what I hope happens is that at a minimum, we can stop increasing the amount of virgin production. And as many of these really intelligent and amazing people on the line today have said, make it simpler, make it easier to recycle, make things fit together better. And I think that will really help. Now, there is actually some activity in the recycling feedstock market, and that is that the pure cotton, the stuff that will actually be the most recyclable, even the post-consumer stream, is becoming harder to get already, even though there are not a ton of commercial scale chemical recycling technologies, for example. So yes, I hope we get to the point where everything is designed well, there's enough technology, growth of virgin resource consumption has stopped and is starting its downward trend. And we have to figure out how do we, where are we going to get our input materials from? But I also think if we're shifting how we use and consume, buying less, reusing more, I think we'll be able to figure out that balance. And I think actually marketing is a key part of this. I say this all the time, but nobody knew they needed air in their tennis shoes until Nike put it in there and said they needed it. Nobody knew they needed a smartphone until that was put on the table as an offer. So I think there's also this component of let's make being smart about how we use our textile resources more of an accepted, just common mainstream piece. And then perhaps we'll get to the place where we can balance the amount of fiber that we use, the amount of virgin resources we use, and turn around the linear side of what we do today.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy, and thanks everyone. It has been really inspiring afternoon. I think that this actually, this seminar and these examples also shows that, well, wide collaboration is needed, and really this kind of new ecosystem building, new ecosystem understanding is really emerging. And I think that Tracy is a good example that there are also totally new kind of professional skills are needed to while we are building this kind of ecosystem. So there are this kind of like a new professions, new skills, and new understanding is really, this kind of middlemen are really needed in the future that really builds the ecosystem understanding. So thanks everyone. It has been quite inspiring, and it was nice to be sharing this afternoon with you.